but some number of ways to operate around it. Now, that said, it is one of the most dangerous cards in Aaron's deck for David.
True name Nemesis, the most dangerous man in Magic.
Merfolk. It's definitely the most dangerous Merfolk, because none of the Merfolk besides that are very dangerous.
Mutavault.
That's true, Mutavault. Chameleon Colossus.
Looks like each player taking their time before evaluating. Nobody wants to be the one to lose the game of chicken, picking up their hand first.
Of course, it's a sign of weakness.
Yeah.
David here at 7-1, presumably near the bottom end of the tiebreakers of the X and Ones having to play this round. Aaron Gaudio, 6-1-1, hoping his tiebreakers hold in the event that he wins.
Now, Gaudio's playing a pretty classic mixture. Force of Wills and counter spells in order to have the permission angle, Thought Seize for some disruption, and really just being an Esper Stoneblade type of deck,
Yeah. You see David here taking a mulligan. And
I love to see this, though. Vindicate.
I love it.
I love it, too. I think Vindicate is a criminally underplayed card.
The card Vindicate and the card Counterspell are actually near the top of my list of most underplayed cards in Legacy.
Oh, I believe it. Both of them should be played so much more often. It's like people want to get all fancy, and they come up with all these really creative, clever things to show how, like they're like, oh, I can use this card and this card. It's like sometimes simple is best.
Yeah.
Counterspell is a card that counters an awful lot of spells.
What would be your vote for most underplayed card in Legacy?
Maybe Brainstorm.
It's not played by everyone 100% of the time. You see David off of his mulligan start off with a turn 1 Rashad Import.
Not playing Brainstorm is like, I don't know, hitting your head against the wall repeatedly. It's just like, what are you doing? That's a little weird. Like, we're at a Magic tournament. Why are you just hitting your head against the wall?
Turn 2 Wasteland from David. Actually, surprisingly few number of white sources in this deck for a mono-white deck. 10 planes, 3 copies of Caracas, Cavern of Souls, and a Horizon Canopy, but 4 ports and 4 wastelands, so a lot of colorless lands as well.
3 copies of Caracas is pretty gangster.
Yep, but it's part of this deck's overall game plan against Sneak and Show specifically is Caracas.
So do you think we might see a wasteland targeting the Marsh Flats that's tapped?
I believe we will see that. So heads up play by David, using Rashad Import to tap the Marsh Flats at the end of the turn, then taking his opportunity to wasteland. Aaron with a source of plowshares for the Mother of Runes that David was able to produce off of his Caracas. And no second land from Aaron here, and this Rashad Import can start doing some really serious damage.
Yeah, I mean, that Marsh Flats, it would have been tempting to go get a basic swamp so that it couldn't be wasted. The problem being he desperately needs blue, and it's his only source.
Yeah. So David tries to play Mother of Runes here. That is met by Force of Will from Aaron. And David is going to start porting. Ports the plains in Aaron's upkeep.
This is sort of a Goblin-esque sort of thing where you got the 4 wastelands, 4 ports.
Yeah.
It's kind of sweet.
It is now Stoneforge Mystic from David.
I love the discipline, leading with the Mother of Runes, draw the plow, lead with the Mother of Runes, draw the force. Now that the coast is clear, I mean, once he Force of Wills it, he doesn't really have much else, or else he wouldn't want to pitch 2 cards. Mm-hmm. Now you play the Stoneforge Mystic, which was the big one, the one that you really wanted.
So very sharp play here by David so far.
Definitely, and these White Winnie decks are so much more disruptive than some of their ancestors, which I guess is why why they warrant such a nonsensical name as Death and Taxes. I mean, the amount of interaction with 4 Phyrexian Revokers, the Aven Mind Sensors, the Wastelands, the Rashad Imports. I mean, this is a lot more disruption than we would see from a lot of other decks.
Yeah, and
Thalias.
Wasteland Import is such a critical combination for allowing, purportedly honest decks to actually have some element of unfairness and sort of universal disruption to them. I've won my fair share of PTQs with 4 port, 4 wasteland, and a lot of nonsense.
Man, what I love too is these wastelands in play mean that even though Aaron has drawn another dual land, he's only going to get 1 mana out of it before it gets destroyed.
Yeah, trying to make it count here. As you see, Stoneforge Mystic activated at the end of the turn, puts Batterskull into play. I mean, we're not seeing a ton of the a ton of the death and taxes, the specific elements of the deck. We're not really seeing the Flicker Wisp type of action, but.
But I mean, if David had not played his cards in this order, he'd be sitting here with a Mother of Runes instead of a Batterskull and a Stoneforge Mystic.
Oh, absolutely. As you see Phyrexian Revoker added to the table. That's going to name Engineered Explosives. And Aaron is really under the gun here as he decides to deploy the Scrubland he's been holding, plays Thoughtseize, reveals a hand of Source of Plowshares, Phyrexian Revoker, and Serra Avenger.
That's pretty close to the give-up stage where you're like, well, I can't possibly win. I just want a little more information about his hand.
David going to take a draw. We see a lot of Wasteland games in Legacy. We rarely see Rashad Import games, but this was definitely a Rashad Import game.
And yet another Wasteland. And the Rashad Import in the upkeep. This should do it. Now, this is for top 8 of the Open.
Well, it certainly is for David. It's less clear for Aaron. David, I assume by the fact that, usually at the end of a Swiss tournament, you pair 1 versus 2, 3 versus 4, 5 versus 6. The fact that David is being paired against Aaron probably means that David has the worst tiebreakers among the X and 1s. So he, in that world, definitely needs to play. David, rather, sorry. Aaron, it's not clear. We don't have the breakers in front of us. His breakers are likely to be very good if he's the top of the X1 and 1s. But it's definitely a win and in for David and likely a win and in for Aaron as well. Moving to the sideboard. I have David's in front of me. We have 2 copies of Oblivion Ring, a Pithy Needle, a Ratchet Bomb, 2 copies of Cataclysm, a Grafdigger's Cage, 2 Enlightened Tutors, 2 Aethersworn Canoness, Manriki Gasari, 2 Rest in Peace, and a Spellskite. This is a fairly typical Death and Taxes sideboard where you see some 1 and 2 of artifacts or enchantments glued together with a couple of copies of Enlightened Tutor. I would anticipate that we're going to see Manriki Gasari come in, as it's very good in equipment mirror matches. I actually wouldn't be surprised to see Cataclysm come in as well, because David is much more capable of getting out on the front foot, and Aaron's deck is much more mana intensive. So if David's able to get some sort of advantage, especially with Aether Vial, Cataclysm could be a huge deal.
Yeah, on Aaron's side, he's looking at a little bit of removal, but it's not even that great. I mean, Supreme Verdict could be okay, but it's so hard to get up to 4. Zealous Persecution, good enough, worth it, but still not an all-star. Humility could be a powerful card, a little bit slow. He doesn't really have anything breathtaking.
Yeah, I think that, Humility is an interesting card in Legacy sideboards, because I feel, there's a lot of decks, like against David's, for example, where it's kind of marginal. I mean, certainly he has text boxes and some creatures with power and such, but it's certainly not Gristlebrand and Emrakul by any stretch of the imagination. But once you have Lingering Souls in your deck, I feel like you can be a lot more liberal bringing in Humility, because that mixture of cards is punishing against almost any sort of creature strategy. Right.
I think the only the 2 big variables are you going to get up to 4? And obviously that game, I mean, even though that we saw ports and Wastelands left and right, he can only has 4 Wastelands and 4 ports in his deck, and you're not always going to be light on mana. But second of all, are you okay with the fact that equipment doesn't get stopped by Humility? The equipment can cause somebody who's under Humility to still be able to break through. Mm-hmm. One other card I think we might see, Disenchant. Not everybody plays Disenchant like Gaudio, but I think that the possibility of being able to hit a Batterskull, a sword, something like that, is good. But the fact that he already saw Phyrexian Revoker and is going to suspect Aether Vial makes for lots of good targets.
Yeah, this is a pretty common Esper Stoneblade style of sideboard where it's just a lot of 1 and 2 ofs to clean up some post-board games, remove some of your inefficient cards. And I agree with you. I think Disenchant I wouldn't want to have 4 Disenchants in against David, no. But 1 will certainly provide some good value.
Yeah, and we are nothing if not lovers of value.
Mm-hmm. We are.
I'll tell you what I would cut. I think I would cut all the Force of Wills.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just the wrong way to try to fight him.
Yeah, the Death and Taxes deck is really redundant. No real superstar or a card gluing it together. I guess you can argue Aether Vial, Stoneforge Mystic, but it's really hard to fight this kind of deck with cards like Force of Will.
Yeah. If you kept some, I could see keeping a couple if you just need the tempo plays, but I also wouldn't mind cutting them all if you got enough good stuff to bring in.
All right, Aaron's underway. Leads off with an island.
Yeah, he remembers how much the Wastelands were.
And Aaron looks like he has a really solid hand here. Stoneforge Mystic, some cantrips, some lands, a Force of Will. A lot to work with.
He was about to play Tundra, thinks better of it. Might as well just lead with as many basics as possible.
So Stoneforge Mystic is in.
This is going to make the waters so much smoother for Aaron.
Yeah.
Having access to these basic lands gives him so much more ability to actually just play out his game plan and play a good, honest, real game. In so much as people with True Name Nemesis are even capable of such things.
Yeah. To the extent that that is a laughable premise to begin with, it is.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, quite honestly, the moment that you've cast Stoneforge Mystic, you no longer have a leg to stand on. Like, that's...
You lose all credibility with
Right.
such things. David going for a Stoneforge Mystic of his own. Let's see if this is met.
Eric Lauer and I were talking about this Friday. Oh, Force of Will. Well, kept him in and sure looked good here. We were talking about this on Friday. Out of all the creatures who are real creatures, you know, not the weird combo creatures like Elgari Grave Troll.
Or a Gothian Enchantress or something like that.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Stoneforge Mystic gets our vote for, it is the strongest creature in Magic.
I think that's a reasonable, I would have to think about it some. Stoneforge Mystic sounds like a very reasonable guess.
Aaron deliberating what to do. If he just casts the Jitte, he risks it, you know, I guess getting countered, but he knows that the Bauman's not going to have anything. Now, the nice thing about just casting it is then the Stoneforge Mystic can actually get in there. He could also cast the Stoneforge Mystic in his hand, depending on what he wants to do, which could potentially be a shuffle for that Brainstorm.
Yeah, he could also cast the Brainstorm, put the Jitte back, and then use the second Stoneforge Mystic in his hand to go get that Jitte again. So a lot of angles, decides against doing any of it and simply passes the turn. Thalia from David here, that's going to prompt a Brainstorm from Aaron in response. Looks at 2 lands and a counter spell. Actual factual counter spell. And my vote for, to get back to the other conversation, most underplayed card in Legacy, and a card that actually just doesn't get played at all, not like Brainstorm. I think my vote would be for Mana Leak.
Oh yeah?
I think Mana Leak is the least played, most underplayed card in Legacy of cards that get very little play.
Yeah, sometimes you'll see it in those mono blue back to basics decks that just want a 20th counterspell or whatever. Yeah. But it should be played a little bit more than it is, because who the hell has 3 mana laying around?
In Legacy?
Yeah.
An embarrassment of riches. Force of Will on the Thalia here. David's going to follow up with a Wasteland. On the Tundra, Aaron responds by Stoneforge Mysticing in the Umezawa's Jitte.
Now, we're probably, like, I mean, if you're Aaron, do you just want the counters? Get it under control, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I like this play from Aaron. He's going to equip the Jitte onto the Stoneforge Mystic. And now this puts a lot of pressure on David to find an answer. The deck is not really flush with answers to opposing equipment.
Yeah, I mean, about the best he has available to him is the Phyrexian Revoker. Beyond that, I mean, he's stuck trying to do it the hard way.
So Flickerwisp enters the battlefield here, targets the Umezawa's Jitte. It appears with that trigger on the stack, Aaron's going to go ahead, take care of the Flickerwisp. But this is not a long-term solution. Cavern of Souls is on Elemental.
Yeah, this is going to cost Aaron, this is going to tax Aaron 2 mana. That's why they call it Death and Taxes. Stoneforge Mystic gets in.
Equipped with the Jitte, and Aaron with a pretty good leftover here, another land and another copy of Stoneforge Mystic if he's feeling so inclined. So cracks his fetch land, and I believe this will be another Stoneforge Mystic for another piece of really powerful equipment.
At this point, do you get the sword? Oh, actually, he does. Yeah, do you get the sword just because he can cast it, or do you get the Batter Skull for the bigger blowout?
I think now that you have the second copy of Stoneforge Mystic, you can pretty reliably get the Batter Skull, as there's very little chance that David's able to take care of both Stoneforge Mystics by the time it gets back to your turn.
Yeah, I mean, his only hope is the Phyrexian Revoker, but if he Revokers, he's going to have to name Jitte.
Right. So he goes and gets the Batter Skull. Horizon Canopy, the land for David. A singleton in his list. Sometimes you see more than that in Death and Taxes. Sometimes you see 0.
Yeah, if there's one thing you can count on, it's seeing either more than that, or the same amount, or less. Or Death and Taxes.
Right. A lot of angles. Just a lot of angles. I'm not a huge fan of Horizon Canopy in the deck. I believe I would play 0. See Athalia.
It's easy to assume that the life loss isn't going to matter, but Legacy is actually a much more aggressive format than people give credit to.
No, I totally agree, especially when you're talking about the Rug and Blue-White Red Delver strategies, because they're often hitting you for 3 at a time, whereas Neville Mongoose or Delver of Secrets or True Name Nemesis and Lightning Bolt. So actually going from 20 to 18 is an appreciable amount of damage when you're getting hit by multiples of 3 so often.
There is the Manriki Gasari, his primary road to getting out of a Jite.
A Saviors of Kamigawa Superstar. The biggest issue here is, of course, trying to actually get it onto a creature that can survive. But once online, can do some amount of work to stop Aaron's barrage of equipment. My main critique of the Horizon Canopy is twofold. One is the damage isn't very good, and 2, neither are the cards that you're drawing once you're in that stage of the game.
Yeah. Come on, Sir Avenger.
All right, so before combat, Aaron's going to use an Umazawa's Jite counter to remove the Thalia, remove the first striking blocker from play. The Stoneforge Mystic comes across uncontested. 2 more counters go on, and if Aaron wants to, he can take care of David's Stoneforge Mystic right now. And it looks like he is going to make that move and take care of the Stoneforge Mystic. And he has drawn Counterspell as well to go along with the Batterskull in his hand, so just a really perfect setup here. So here comes Bramaz.
The king?
The king. Well, I think it's only, you can only call it the king if it resolves.
Which it does.
Looks like Aaron is deciding to counterspell.
No!
And Bramaz, unfortunately, not an elemental, so the counter resolves provides no utility here. And now, the second equipment comes down. It's Batterskull.
Both games going to whoever Stoneforge Mystic'd the most.
Yeah.
So far.
Although this game I would consider to be definitely just a straight-up Stoneforge Mystic game. Game 1 from David, the Mana Denial was really the critical piece.
The actual Stoneforge.
Yep. So Batterskull comes across along with the 2 Stoneforge Mystics. Triggers the Jite. And moves the Jite onto the Batterskull. And I do not believe that David has much productive to draw towards, but he is going to sacrifice that Horizon Canopy and try to find it.
Balance would be good here. He moves the game to the boarding. It's time for game 3.
Tying it up, being on the play, so important in Legacy, especially decks that have Rashad Port and Wasteland. That's where I believe
is that mostly because whoever goes first gets to play a land before the other person?
That's part of it. That's
okay.
part of it. Also, that generally speaking, 2-mana spells are more powerful than 1-mana spells. So getting to go first with your 2-mana spells is significant.
Yeah, like like Ancestral Recall versus 2-mana spells.
Spirit of the Labyrinth, let's say.
Yeah.
As an
let's
example.
say, just for
just
example.
hypothetical.
Sure. Here's a question for you.
Yeah.
What's the most powerful card in Magic that is legal in Vintage besides Ancestral Recall and Black Lotus?
Ooh, that's a great question. Besides Ancestral Recall and Black Lotus,
what is the best card in Magic that's legal in Vintage besides the 2 good ones?
Are we talking about in Vintage specifically, or just imagine a standard format?
All formats, the sum of all contexts. And we're not just talking about once it's on the stack. None of this, well, the answer is Emrakul. No,
I would probably go with Time Walk. I believe because,
that's a totally reasonable answer.
If you want to argue Yawgmoth's Will, for example, there's a lot of standard formats that you could put Yawgmoth's Will into that it would do very little damage. Like if Dark Ritual is not a card that's going on, or Fast Mana.
No,
Yawgmoth's
Fast
Will-
Mana is.
No, I'm saying the reason that my answer is Time Walk and not Yawgmoth's Will is because if you ever put Time Walk into a standard legal format, it would be the best thing going on by a country mile. There's a lot of formats like current standard where you put in Yawgmoth's Will, it would actually be fairly innocuous because it's predicated on Dark Ritual and other sources of mana.
How about this? Let's talk about specifically in Vintage where all these cards are legal.
Yawgmoth's Will.
Yawgmoth's Will's number 3?
Yes. If we're talking about,
Sure. What's number 4? Let me give you some choices.
Okay.
Time Walk, Tinker, and Demonic Tutor.
I would take Time Walk.
And Mox Sapphire and Mana Crypt.
I would still take Time Walk.
So I think Tinker is number 4 and Time Walk's number 5.
Tinker's a reasonable choice.
I think that if Magic were to ever get to a place where they actually need to ban a card in Vintage, I don't even know what you could ban besides Yawgmoth's Will or Tinker.
I mean, it would, it depends how you feel about the other decks, right?
Well, what I mean is that, I don't know. I just think that Yawgmoth's Will and Tinker are like both 3 mana win the game so much of the time,
Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of low power formats where those cards would make very little impact.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, like, out of those cards, which one's the best in a mono-red deck in Standard?
Mox Sapphire.
Dude, Black Lotus would be so good. Turn 1, Black Lotus, Chandra, shoot your Elvish Mystic.
Turn 1, Black Lotus, Plains, Spark Trooper. Just so many insane openings.
Yeah, we'll just let them know. So many insane openings, as the old saying goes.
David taking a mulligan here, David keeping 7.
We were talking about this recently. What if you could play Standard, but you get to add either 4 cards from Legacy, like 4 copies of 1 Legacy card, or 2 different Vintage restricted cards?
Oh, I answered this question before. I said, I believe I said that I would play Ancestral and Soul Ring in a blue-white deck.
Oh, see, I thought your answer was like 4 Chain Lightnings.
Yeah, exactly. 4 Lava Spikes. Can't mess it up.
No, I guess Lightning Spike, yeah.
No, if I was actually trying to win again, it would be Ancestral Soul Ring.
Ancestral Soul Ring's pretty good. Soul Ring is kind of like a Black Lotus from here on out.
It's Black Lotus for the whole game. So we have a little update on our standings here. It does look like Aaron is quite live for a top 8 berth with a win here.
Yeah, it looks like he's currently a few percentage points higher than the next candidate down, meaning that most likely, if he wins this, he is a favorite to top 8.
Yep. And a good start for David here, a turn 1 Plains and an Aether Vial.
Now, we were talking about the Aether Vials in Merfolk and the Aether Vials in Goblins. How good is the Aether Vial in White and Taxes?
Well, I think it's a weird thing. Death and Taxes does not need Aether Vial to actually cast its spells. For example, when Goblins doesn't have Aether Vial, Siege Gang Commander is not entering play. When Merfolk doesn't have Vial, it's often just color screwed. Whereas, Death and Taxes can generally cast its creatures, but a lot of Death and Taxes creatures play really well at instant speed. They're kind of tricky. So having the Vial there is actually quite valuable.
Oh, yeah, particularly when Sarah Avenger is one of the ones you can cheat down.
Yeah,
that's where you start to see where it gets the name Death Weenie,
right.
Where it's like just boom.
So a Thoughtseize there for Aaron on the first turn, takes Thalia. David takes his Vial up to 1.
What do you make a Ratchet Bomb?
Ooh.
You don't really see that too often. That is an answer to True Name Nemesis.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. That's probably a concession to True Name Nemesis.
Yeah. You don't see that too often. And it's also a backdoor answer to Lingering Souls,
Yeah, so there's some utility there. Not a card I would associate as being particularly good against Aaron, but David is specifically worried about that card.
My only concern is that once you start adding all these reactive cards to your deck, you run out of creatures to vial down.
Yeah, and that's especially in the face of Thoughtseizes and counter spells, every piece matters.
Yeah, particularly when you have such an evil and vile draw as this. You can always see the hesitation. People wanting to, they have Wasteland, you want to play out your mana, but at the same time, you want to minimize your exposure to Wasteland.
And this is really, you're seeing, Wasteland and Rashad Port in David's hand, and these cards are especially good once you have Aether Vial.
Oh, yeah.
That Wretched Bomb should be untapped, I assume, and it is. So in response to the Underground Sea, there was some mana floated. Aaron's going to brainstorm, but we've seen this recipe out of Merfolk and Goblins too. Aether Vial plus using your lands as mana denial is a great recipe for just, all swaths of opponents.
See, I just love this. Legacy is just this format where people sit around pretending it's okay to play with 4 brainstorms and to just play against other people who have 4 brainstorms. That's just a thing. That's just, hey, yeah. Hey, do you guys want to come over to my house and sit around, maybe watch some TV and shoot 4 semi-automatic weapons into my ceiling of my living room? Sure. Let's each bring 4.
Yeah. It is, by no small measure, Legacy's best card.
Yeah.
Polluted Delta, the play for Aaron.
How long do you think until Polluted Delta gets reprinted?
I would guess within 24 months.
24 months?
Within 24 months, I would say.
Wow, that's soon.
It's pretty soon. Caracas, the play for Aaron. Upkeep, uses Rashad Port on the swamp again.
I know it sure would be nice to take some pressure off of the value, the cost of fetch lands in Modern. Because Modern, gains so much widespread popularity. Unfortunately, the population of fetch lands is very finite. I mean, there's only so many out there, and Zendikar at this point was what, 4 years ago?
2010, I believe, or 2011.
Yeah, so 3.5, 4 years ago, and the player population has more than doubled in the last 3 years. So 3.5 years. So it's like there's half as many fetch lands as we need. Plus, Modern wasn't even a thing back then.
Yep. I think the writing's on the wall. Something's going to be done about that eventually. You see a brainstorm here from Aaron. 2 lands and a Force of Will. A lot of mana in Aaron's hand.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, and this is actually not that bad of a situation here for Aaron. I mean, it's always unfortunate to be behind the gun of an Aether Vial, and that Ratchet Bomb is threatening to disrupt something at some point. However, David has no pressure, and Aaron is safely escaping David's mana denial elements.
Yep. Vial activated in a turn. Brings in Burmaz.
Nice. That is exactly what Aaron did not want to see.
And a Flicker Wisp drawn for David too, and this is going to be all sorts of headaches for Aaron. This is really the right kind of mixture of stuff the Death and Taxes game plan is looking for. Mana denial, disruptive elements, some creatures with either a lot of utility or that make combat very challenging for your opponent. It's all on display here. And Burmaz, I think, is a really sweet addition to this deck.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Burmaz has not been short on hype received this time around. However, he's definitely been living up to it in the sense that he's good enough to play in a lot of formats. Basically every single format except Vintage. And who knows, I bet he'll show up in Vintage within the next calendar year.
Turn 1 Black Lotus, Burmaz.
Taste it.
Nah. This is the most powerful thing I could imagine doing with my Black Lotus, was putting this guy
Dude,
in play.
Caracas protects Burmaz.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Angles within angles.
Oh, yeah.
Put it right back into play with the Vial.
One of the nice things, too, about Burmaz in Vintage is that he's quite a bit bigger than most of the creatures people play. I mean, obviously, he's smaller than Tarmogoyf or Blightsteel Colossus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is smaller than Blightsteel.
No, that's true.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Doesn't quite stack up there. Vintage is a format known for its large creatures, so not surprising that it's a little undersized there. It is bigger than Goblin Welter, so that's a thing.
Yeah, and Trigon Predator.
Right.
That's the main one. He just busts right through. I don't know. I think creatures are underrated in Vintage. I mean, they're very popular, of course, but like people are all just focused on nothing but like Young Pyromaster or Dark Confidant. Burmaz is a little bit bigger.
So David untaps and takes a draw here. Aaron simply adding lands, not really casting very much right now. And Burmaz coming across the red zone yet again.
He's kind of like a Young Pyromancer, except a cat.
Right. And you don't have to play any nonsense spells.
I'm surprised there aren't more like internet meme pictures involving Burmaz. He's a cat.
Yeah.
And people like it.
It's only a matter of time.
People like cats on the internet. I've been there. I know about it, man.
Right. I was literally there before the match started. I was in the internet.
So David, has an ever-growing army. I mean, if you're going to have only one creature attacking, it might as well be the king of Erascus.
And Aaron, with just not very much action in his hand, he does have a Zealous Persecution that's going to buy him some time at some point, but no long-term answers to Bramaz in hand.
Bramaz kind of reminds me of Freddie Mercury. He just can steal the show all by himself.
Yeah.
You know, he's just, you know, like, you know.
So Flicker Wisp end of turn, taking out the Tundra.
And this is potentially game over, right? Like, anything short of a plow means we're not even going to see one more turn. Bramaz is just putting in so much work.
Yeah, this is going to be the Zealous Persecution. It's going to buy Aaron a little bit of time here.
Oh, that's great, too, hitting the Flicker Wisp.
Yep. So this gives him a little bit of breathing space. Again, no long-term answer to Bramaz in hand, just a Jitte and some counter spells. But and you can see David wisely leaving the Caracas up to protect Bramaz from any shenanigans. Vial set to 3, so any plow, whatever, David can just pick it up and put it right back out.
And I think David Bauman is going into the top 8.
Yeah, just Aaron with a mess. Flooded out here pretty badly. A couple Force of Wills and a Jitte in hand.
Man. So, actually, I guess he can live one more turn if David has nothing.
But the bigger issue here is even his outs here, Source of Plowshares,
they're just delays.
Or Supreme Verdict, they're not even delays at that point. At this point, this is pretty generous because Caracas picks it up, Aether Vial puts it right back out.
Yeah, it's got to be an instant speed one just to fog it all.
Right. Mazav's Jitte going on Bramaz. Bramaz attacks, brings a buddy. Hi, I'm a buddy. Jitte triggers. And passes the turn.
Continuing to disrupt the mana.
Rashad and Port in upkeep, I'm assuming targeting the Tundra.
And the other problem is that at 1 life, even if he could stall the Bramaz for a turn, that soldier is going to pick, the cat's going to pick up a Jitte.
Yeah, and that's the
concession. Even matter, it's 1.
David Bauman, 2 games to 1. He's going to be moving on to the quarterfinals. Probably a very high seed as well at X1. Congratulations to him. And just a really solid performance. Played that match pretty skillfully in my mind. And really leaned on his mana disruption to carry the day. Also, good showing for Bramaz here.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The Bramaz single-handedly thrashing. I mean, obviously, Aether Vial is the
Ports and Wasteland, they're all that stuff is connected.
It's a team effort, as all these Death and Taxes efforts are, but if you're going to have only one creature, Bramaz showing, just his, proving himself a little bit in Legacy, a format where he hasn't really got much respect yet.
Yeah, it's curious, people are with Legacy, I feel, a little slow on the uptake sometimes, or stubborn about incorporating new cards. Bramaz is, pound for pound, so much better than the other creatures in the Death and Taxes deck. I understand,
Yeah,
Sarah